I'm so proud of everyone who's thinking about improving their landscaping this spring. It can feel like a challenging project if you've never done it before. Now is the time to start planning. So today we're looking at real houses to find the easiest way to create a gorgeous yard that will make your neighbors jealous. At the end, I'll show you an example of a bold native plant garden that makes incredible use of a small space. Let's get it. Okay, let's look at our first house. This is actually a submission from one of our viewers. So excited, this is the first one. This is Charlotte's house. Thank you, Charlotte, for submitting a picture of your home so that we could all learn from what you have started here. It's a beautiful home, new build, and she's already got something great started right here in the front with these flowers and other plants, but she really wants to expand the garden. I think she did say that she wants to move some of these somewhere else, but mostly she wants to expand the garden. So before I do this, let's go ahead and spruce up this house a little bit. A little bit of brightness here, and maybe a little bit more color. Let's turn that grass a little bit more green. Oh, beautiful. Okay, I made it look a little bit wild, but that's okay. So the easiest way to expand the garden here, she's already got this shape right here, is we can take this edging. This is a natural edge. That means that she doesn't have any bricks here. She doesn't have any plastic or metal edging. This is a very flexible edge, and we're just gonna go ahead and take our shovel and edge it out. There we go. That'll easily more than double the size of the garden. The other thing I want to think about here is that we have this grass that is touching the siding, and we don't really want that because it's going to be hard to use the string trimmer on the grass that's right up against the siding. You're going to mess up the string trimmer a little bit, so let's just go ahead and get rid of that. Okay, beautiful. Now I don't want to make this area any larger than it is because there's probably a gate here where you can enter the backyard. So we don't want to obscure that with plants or anything. So we're just going to have, this is probably just 3 feet on the side right here. And then we're going to have quite a bit of space in the middle. Now, when you have a garden and you want to expand it like this is a pretty large addition. You are going to want to make sure that you can reach the center of the garden so that you can weed. Otherwise, you're going to maintain all around the edges and you're not going to maintain the center, and the center is going to look bad. I have a little stock person. Really, when you think about how far this person is going to be able to reach into the garden, they're not going to be able to reach all the way in the center here unless there's something else. So you know me, I'm going to put a path. This is for a couple of reasons. One of them is that you're not going to be able to reach the center of the garden. It's going to get too big and you're going to have a really hard time maintaining the middle. The other thing is that there may be people in the house that aren't going to want to walk around the garden to get to the backyard. They are going to cut right through here. So we're going to go ahead and put a path. Instead of being mad at them when they do that, we'll just say, okay, we'll put some stones. They don't have to be expensive stones. I'm just putting this here to just kind of symbolize any kind of stones or any kind of pavers that you can put here that will lead you through the garden. This way you can access it both from the sides and the center of the garden. You're not going to be seeing the path because it's really going to be blocked by a whole bunch of flowers. So now let's add our plant palette. There we go. Now, I probably should do this last, but I'm going to do it first so I don't forget. This area here with the overhang is going to be perfect for some hanging baskets. They really tie it together. Already looking cute. Now I do see something that we might want to cover, which is this gas line right here. A lot of people do put like a shrub right here. I see that there already is a shrub. So I don't need to remove this shrub. I'm not sure which kind of shrub it is. That will grow larger and that's going to cover up the gas line. It's just going to take probably 1 more year and it'll be covered. So I like that there's a shrub there. There might be something else that would be nice to give the garden a little bit more height and variation, and that's going to be tall grasses. So let me just grab a tall grass over here and just put it in the corner. Now this space is bigger than we think. It can hold 3 tall grasses. That is no problem. Even without the extension of the garden, I think you could put 3 tall grasses right here. Sometimes we think of the garden as smaller than it is and we want to put a lot of variety in a small space. But I really want to encourage you to start using larger groups of flowers so that they look really nice both up close and from far away. Let's see. In front of the tall grasses, we can go ahead and put maybe some phlox. How about that? And maybe some short grasses and butterfly weed in a border. I like that. One thing you really want to look at is the side of the house over here. I did request the orientation of the house. So this is a west facing house. So this is west, and that means that this is the south side of the house. The south side of the house and the north side of the house are going to have totally different plants. There's going to be very little overlap in plants that are going to like full sun and full shade. Very few. So it was very important that I know whether this is the south or the north side. And because it's the south side, this is also going to be a full sun area where we can put full sun plants. So this is not going to be a shade garden at all. I have had some requests for shade gardens and it's coming, I promise. Go ahead and put some Monarda bradburyana here. Spirobolus, Monarda bradburyana, more Spirobolus, and this is butterfly weed right here in orange. And this is our garden phlox. So that kind of fills in some of the holes up there, and then we can continue to throw down flowers in the garden. This full sun is really dreamy here because we can put all kinds of beautiful stuff here. This is an aromatic aster. You can put all different kinds of asters. I'm just choosing aromatic aster because it's a little bit shorter. It's maybe 3 feet and it gets this really big clump of purple right here. Now I don't want to have too many flowers compared to grasses. I always want to have grasses. So here's some little blue stem. Now you might notice I am using plants of the eastern US, but if you're familiar with other kinds of flowers, you can put whatever you like here, as long as it likes full sun. So I like using asters because they bloom later in the season, like in September, and so does goldenrod. I've got some goldenrod right here, and this actually is, I'm gonna imagine that this is Ohio goldenrod. I really like using that. Sometimes they need a little bit more water when they get started, but I have mine in my full sun garden and it does great. Goldenrod is great to pair with asters because they bloom at the same time. So you get this yellow and purple together and it just looks incredible. And you know, I'm gonna put black-eyed Susans in here because we've got full sun. And I'm gonna put 2 clumps of black-eyed Susans. I'm gonna go ahead and put some over here because you kind of can't have too many of these. They look really good, and when you think you're putting in too many, you probably need to put in a little bit more. Let's add some more little blue stem. Little blue stem is great. I wish I had more pictures of it. It's just a really pretty grass. Just 3 feet tall, beautiful bronze color in the fall and winter, and penstemon loves full sun. So let's go ahead and put a drift of penstemon in here. Now a drift is kind of different from a clump because it's a little bit longer. It's not just like a circle. It's just kind of you lay it out a little bit more. I hope that makes sense, but that's a drift. Now in the front, you know I like to put my butterfly weed. These look great in drifts and clumps. With butterfly weed, it's just really nice to have a couple of clumps of it because that orange color is wild in the middle of summer. They bloom about mid-June. Now you see how the grasses make everything else pop? They make everything look nice. So grasses do not take away from your garden. They actually make it way more professional looking. Here's some Monarda. Now I love this Monarda bradburyana. You can also use any other kind of bee balm. I just like using the native species because they're just more vigorous. Some of those cultivars are not very long lived and you'll keep them for a couple years and they'll kind of die back. Some of the cultivars do really well, some of them don't. So it's just kind of a risk and you have to play around if you're going to use cultivars. If you're using the native species, they're usually pretty hardy and they live several years. This Monarda also reseeds itself, so you're going to get more over time. And it's just kind of an insurance for you. Now this is full blasting sun, and I am gonna put some coneflowers in here. Sometimes coneflowers don't like full sun, we'll just have to see. I'm talking about Echinacea purpurea. If you plant Echinacea pallida, it does great in sun, and it is very long-lived. We can even take some of these other small grasses and put them in the middle of the garden, that's fine. They fill it in nicely. If this is your first time seeing a video like this, I usually do mention that I use about 30% grasses in my designs because the grasses just make it look good. They make the rest of the flowers look good. They make the garden look good, even in the winter. So I think this is pretty full. Thanks so much for bearing with me while I learn how to use this program. I'm not actually great at using like Photoshop and stuff like that, so I appreciate your patience while I learn. All right, now we got the side of the house and this is still full sun. So I'm gonna put some grasses. These grasses love full sun. So now that I've got 3 grasses right here, I can go ahead and put some asters there. This is gonna be a very dry area, by the way. I would only put plants that are really drought tolerant right next to the house on the south side because the house kind of doesn't let any water get at the plants from the one side. So I would only plant very drought tolerant plants here like penstemon, Spirobolus, asters, black-eyed Susans, but this stuff is all gonna do well here. Over time, you do learn when these plants bloom, and part of designing this is just knowing when that's gonna happen. So I know that black-eyed Susans bloom in July, and the asters bloom in September, and the penstemon is blooming in June. So you're always gonna have something blooming here. It can be kind of a lot to memorize all that stuff. I made this bloom chart right here, so you can look throughout the season and kind of look at the calendar when these plants are gonna be blooming. So you wanna pick a plant from each category because you don't wanna have everything bloom in July and then the whole rest of the year you just have a bunch of sticks and leaves. So there you have it. You got a path right through. The garden is expanded. We've got a side garden here with full sun, drought tolerant plants. And then you even have some hanging baskets up here. They've got a basket down here with beautiful petunias. Maybe they could anchor something up here and have a hanging basket with petunias in it. That would look beautiful. Cute little welcome sign. This is a beautiful house. So here's the house before and here's the house after. Not bad. Let's take a look at the next yard. Okay, we have another submission from Tracy. Thank you so much, Tracy. Let's brighten this up a little bit. There we go. Perfect. Now Tracy is showing us a picture of her backyard, and it looks like she is already a gardener and has some landscaping in that looks really good. So I'm sure that it looks a lot more impressive in the summer, but I'm so glad that she gave us this picture. She's got 3 trees in her yard right here. This is wonderful, and these are going to give her great privacy. So I can't really tell from the photo whether or not there are other flowers or perennials underneath this tree. These trees definitely can have some plants underneath them. A lot of people feel like they can't plant underneath trees. There's a certain way that you can do it, and I would use plants for dry shade. Now everybody's like, oh man, I have dry shade, it's impossible to plant. No, it's not. Right here we've got wild ginger, Asarum canadense, I think is how it's called. So wild ginger is beautiful. You've got these little horseshoe shaped leaves. They're so pretty. Violets always grow really great in shade. We have a very difficult site at our house and a ton of violets grow there. And in the spring, you just see this carpet of purple and it looks awesome. Who else loves dry shade? Pennsylvania sedge. I freaking love sedges. I can't get enough sedges. If you don't know what to plant in your dry shade, just go online and buy a flat of Pennsylvania sedge if you live in an area where it's native. I'm not talking about doing this if you live somewhere that it's not native. You can easily find a sedge that is native to where you are. Now, when I say sedges, I'm not talking about invasive nut sedge, which we find in our lawns and it invades our flower bed. Nut sedge is a menace, and that's not what I'm talking about. Sedges is a huge classification of plants, and you just want the right species. This Pennsylvania sedge is not weedy. It doesn't invade the grass. It spreads very slowly by rhizomes, and it's very easy to control if you want to, but I never have to. It just kind of stays in place and it looks beautiful. Ferns are often really good for a shady area, but they do sometimes need a little bit more water, so they might not always be the best for dry shade. So I'll go ahead and put some ferns on the side here, kind of away from the trees, because it's going to compete a lot in here for water. And then, oh man, there is a shade phlox that looks beautiful in the spring. It's called Phlox divaricata. It is so pretty. I can never get enough of this plant. Sometimes it's like sold out a lot. That's Phlox divaricata. If you are a go-getter and you want to make a gorgeous shade garden, go ahead and get some Phlox divaricata. Order it in the spring, order it early to see if you can get as many as possible, because they are kind of small. The other thing about Phlox divaricata is that bunnies and deer love eating it, so you will have to protect it, but they're so pretty. So it's one of those things, it's like kind of a pain, but it's worth it. So a lot of people would just have mulch under their trees because they don't realize that they have a lot of options here. And you even have some more interesting options like this trillium, beautiful little white flower. Most of our shade plants do bloom in the spring. It looks amazing in the spring, and then most of the time in the middle of summer you're gonna get a lot of foliage, and that's just kind of how it is for shade areas. It's still worth it to have a beautiful shade garden, and of course you can always throw daffodil bulbs, just scatter them around in here. Don't fill it completely with daffodils, just kind of scatter them around. That's gonna give you something that's gonna bloom early and it'll look really pretty. She also has this challenging area right here where she's got the air conditioner. There's a lot of things that you can do with this. You can just kind of make a garden right here, but since it's not really interfering with the pathway, I would start out a little bit further and make our air conditioner garden like this. Now you want to be very careful when you're planting in this area because we're planting around utilities and stuff. Always call before you dig. Every state kind of has their 211 or 611, or call Julie is what we do here in Illinois. And they will come and mark just so that you don't accidentally cause like a bad situation. So be very careful when you're digging. Always call ahead. If necessary, just carefully dig by hand with a little hand shovel. Don't use power tools. It looks like it's probably shady. I can see that the grass is struggling a little bit and this is a little bit wet. Whenever I see that, I kind of want to take my Pennsylvania sedge and just put the Pennsylvania sedge in here. Now the shrubs are already covering this view from the street. So, and then when you walk by here, you know, you're going to see all this utilities, but let's go ahead and make it beautiful and let's put some other things in here, like some sedges. These sedges are not going to need to be mowed. They're not going to need to be fertilized. It's not like grass. So every time you kind of encroach on the grass a little bit, you really reduce your dependence on fertilizer and mowing and having to do all that work and spend all that money, honestly. This is kind of a border between dry and moist shade. I'm going to throw some foam flower in here. These are really pretty plants that you can actually get at a lot of garden centers because they're so pretty. They are native to the eastern US, but they are also often used as a landscaping plant. You might say, oh, well, this is all green. You're putting so many green things in here. I want flowers. Well, we do have some limitations when it comes to shade. And some of the things that we do are using texture instead of color. So this fern right here is going to have a different texture than these sedges, and it's going to look different. And they get quite a bit bigger too. Let's throw in some Jacob's ladder. I like to put Jacob's ladder in groups of 3 because it is a small plant. And so when you put 3 there, they kind of are about the same size as a hosta. So I just like to group them together a little bit. Jacob's ladder has really pretty foliage as well as pretty flowers. Now I'm just going to put a couple of violets in here. Violets do tend to take over a little bit, so just watch them. And I would definitely plant sedges. The sedges will compete against the violets, no problem. But the violets might get a little aggro and encroach on some of the Jacob's ladder. So just keep an eye on them. There's no harm in just removing the violets and tossing them because there's more where that came from. I'm running out of time just a little bit, but I did want to just talk about this backyard here. There's this garden edge right here where this tree is, and then there's grass here right underneath these shrubs. Now, these are young shrubs that were planted maybe the last year or 2. You always want to mulch around your trees and shrubs. So we're going to just put mulch in here around these shrubs. They're going to love that. And you're going to love not having to mow around this or accidentally use your weed whacker on it and, you know, ruining your equipment and stuff. This right here, the grass is a little close to this tree. I would go ahead and bring it out a little bit more. So I would bring that mulch out a little bit more, and I would mulch a little bit more with these shrubs. And then this tree probably could use a little bit more mulch. There we go. And we can just mulch right up to the patio. That's really not a problem. If any of the mulch gets on your patio, you can sweep it off. Obviously the grass is also encroaching on the patio, so I wouldn't worry about that. I would give this tree a little more breathing room because they really like that. I really want to give a lot of concrete examples of how this looks, so I found this photo in the best of native plant gardening on Reddit, and this house is incredible. The caption here says, 3 years ago, this was all turf grass. I love this because these people are really good gardeners, and you can see they've done a great job here of making sure the sidewalk is clear, making sure it's not obstructing anybody. A little bit over here, you know, trim this back. I'm a real stickler about the sidewalk being clear. They have really maintained this so well, and it's amazing what they've done in only 3 years. Here you can see the orange milkweed, butterfly milkweed. I mean, it looks great. It's all in bloom. Here's the coneflowers over here, and then I see asters right here and right here. When this butterfly weed is done blooming, you're gonna see that the asters right here, these are the asters, and they are gonna take over and they're gonna be a purple color. So right now you see this orange and these pinks, but in September, those are all gonna be gone. And so you're gonna want something to take over, and these asters are gonna take over. Now I don't see necessarily the goldenrod, or maybe I'm mistaking the asters for goldenrod, but I'm sure that they have goldenrod in here because it's kind of hard to keep it out of your garden, honestly. So you're going to see some yellow, you're going to see some purple in the fall, in September, and even into October. I mean, these guys bloom late. When you have something like aromatic aster or smooth blue aster, that plant blooms in late September, October. So while everyone else is kind of winding down for the season, you're still gonna have blooms through October. It's important to look at the front of the house to see how the garden works with the house. It's possible that this might be too much for some of you, but you can see how the plants look when they're in full bloom and when you group them together. So this right here, this isn't one coneflower. This is like, I don't know, 3 or 4 coneflower plants, and they've clumped them together. And so it just looks like one mass. Same thing with these butterfly weeds. These are not individual plants. There's probably at least 3 plants in every clump. Now these asters is probably one plant because they're just monsters. And see, they have a little sign here that says growing native plants. That's to let your neighbors know, hey, this is intentional. If my garden looks a little messy for a few weeks out of the year between blooms, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing this on purpose. You don't have to call the cops on my garden. We don't call cops on gardens, right guys? That's not a thing. Ooh, look at this milkweed right here. And they have an oak. So they've planted an oak tree in the center of their small yard, and then they just grew a garden around it. So they didn't say, well, I can't do anything with my yard because there's a tree in the front. Here we go. We got our tree and we have our garden too. This looks like it might be a walnut tree. That's gonna give them walnuts in the fall. Let me see if I can see anything else in this picture. They've just done an excellent job of keeping the walkway clear and making their home beautiful, even though this front yard is small. This is not a large front yard, and I'll bet that they see a ton of wildlife. So great job to this person. If you have pictures of your home that you'd like me to take a look at and maybe we can learn from, you can send 3 photos to info-likes-plants@gmail.com. That's info-likes-plants@gmail.com. And if it looks like your house might be a really good fit for this series, I'll have them forward the photos to me, and maybe your house will be next.